From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the JR at the end of the name. It's very important to remember the Junior. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. We got another thing to add here. Hello to everyone currently watching the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network on Channel 7. On your television. We are now locked and loaded on the Gulf Coast Sports Entertainment Network. We have now launched that, and obviously it's going to be your home for a lot of things, this podcast being one of them. So welcome if you're just finding us on that network. So without further ado, let's get into the fire content today. I'm still a little thrown off because we got a Saints Monday night matchup, and everything is a day behind, and it just when you're a creature of routine like we are in football, it just throws everything off. So you kind of feel like you're in a weird spot. But nonetheless, it is Friday, but it feels like a Thursday. But no, it's Friday, kind of a wet Friday here in the city of New Orleans. And I hope it's better wherever you guys are. But in the city of New Orleans, it is a wet, soggy day out there. But we know the Saints are preparing and prepping for the defending Super Bowl champs. I said it twice because they won back-to-back Super Bowl titles. We know that. So here they are getting ready for their Monday night matchup at Arrowhead, and we don't know exactly where they stand health-wise, or we don't have a whole lot of, let's call it, confidence in where they stand health-wise, so that's where we wanted to go with the big picture today. Before we get into that, though, Andre Johnson, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I'll feel better if that rain that you mentioned stops earlier because, like you mentioned, we are shooting this on a Friday, and about an hour from now, I'm going to be at a high school football game. I'm going to Newman and Country Day today. All right. And I would be, I would really appreciate it if I can leave the rain jacket in the car.
Well, hopefully so. Hopefully it works out for you. We'll see. So, yeah, we have our Saints. It would normally be the final injury report. It's actually the Thursday injury report, but it's a significant injury report. So why don't we go there with the big picture today?
Yeah, big picture today. It revolves around the injury report because the big question we're asking is, can the Saints overcome the newest wave of injuries that they're facing? And it is a long report today, Sean, with 6 guys who did not practice, 4 guys who were limited in practice. Starting with the guys who didn't practice, you got linebacker Willie Gay dealing with a hand injury. Taysom Hill dealing with the rib injury that was announced yesterday. Cesar Ruiz still out with that knee injury. You've got Shane Lemieux, recently upgraded from the practice squad last week. He's now dealing with an ankle injury. Defensive end Peyton Turner dealing with a knee injury. And new on the report today, offensive lineman Lucas Patrick. Then the guys who are limited in practice today, Taliesin Fuaga, who has been dealing with a back issue, but now is also dealing with a knee issue. Running back Alvin Kamara, who continues to deal with the hip and ribs injuries. You've got Brian Brzee, the defensive tackle.
He was limited?
He was limited today. And you've got the linebacker, Mario Davis, also limited with the hamstring. So as the main unit that jumps out to me is the offensive line, where your left tackle, Taliesin Fuaga, is limited with a back and a knee issue. Your left guard, Lucas Patrick, who could also play center. He didn't practice at all today with a groin injury. Your center, we already know Eric McCoy is on IR. Your right guard, Cesar Ruiz, he's injured. Then the guys who you're bringing in to replace him in Shane Lemieux, he's also injured.
All right.
So the only guy who's still standing for real is Iron Man Trevor Penning.
Yes. So we should also point out Kendre Miller is up to full after limited on today's Friday. So at the limited on Thursday, he's up to full. So that's probably a good chance that he could potentially see the field. We'll get to him in a little bit later. Okay. So away we go with this topic. Can the Saints overcome the recent run of injuries, the long list of injuries, and go into Arrowhead Stadium and beat the defending champs? Let's just start with the center position, shall we? Week 3, Eric McCoy goes down early in the game. Lucas Patrick slides over from left guard to center. Week 4 rolls around in Atlanta. Patrick slides back to left guard, and they bring up Shane Lemieux, who had never started at center in an NFL game before in his entire career. Then this week, Lemieux is injured, doesn't practice. Then today, Patrick misses with the groin injury, and he practiced on Wednesday fully. So something happened on Wednesday, okay? So they go out and they sign Connor McGovern, who was on the Jets practice squad, brought him to the active roster. That's what you have to do. When you sign a player from the practice squad, they got to come on your active roster, who now, if you look at it and kind of read the breadcrumb, read the tea leaves, if kind of follow the breadcrumbs, now realistically has a chance of playing. So if you're following along from Philly to before Monday night even starts, it went from McCoy to Patrick to Lemieux to possibly McGovern. That's 4 centers in a span of 3 weeks. Okay? That's not ideal, folks. I don't have to tell you guys. I'm sure you guys have figured out if you're watching this podcast, or if you listened to this podcast for quite some time. That is not ideal. And the multiplying effect of Ruiz still being possibly out. He hasn't practiced in a while. And if Patrick can't go and Lemieux can't go, not only is McGovern possibly coming up, well, who's going to play left guard? I think it's Nick Saldiveri-time. It's got to be Nick Saldiveri-time at that point. So now you're talking about a third different version of this offensive line in the last 3 weeks. And you're asking me if the Saints can overcome that?
Can they do it?
To just one position group? Not to mention, like we said, Cesar Ruiz, possibly Willie Gay Jr., probably Taysom Hill. And here's my honest answer. Yes, they can.
Whew.
They can. I'm not predicting it, but they can. But their only hope is if this is a low-scoring, muddy, ugly contest where it's physical and it's just not a pretty high-flying game, because if it gets into that, we know who that would favor. Here's the thing, though. When you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, I know they're 4-0, but it's been, I hate saying this, it hasn't been the most impressive 4-0, but it's still 4-0. And in some ways, it's very impressive because they've overcome a lot of mediocrity to be 4-0. In other ways, it just doesn't look very Chiefs-like like they had in years past. But some of those years, even though it hadn't looked Chiefs-like, they've still won Super Bowls. Outside of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, no one really scares me on their offense. No one really scares me on the perimeter of their offense for sure. Is it Worthy? Is that the receiver?
Yeah,
Worthy?
He's fast.
But one guy, plus their backfield right now, isn't much better. On defense, it really all comes down to Chris Jones. We know that, and we saw just how dynamic, how a dynamic D tackle can disrupt the interior of the Saints' offensive line if they're not ready. We saw it in Philly a couple of weeks ago. And if there's some kind of switch midweek like this, I don't know how long McGovern's been here, but if he's got a realistic shot at going, I hope he's in a meeting room right now. So we'll see if that is indeed the case. I love Nick Bolton as their linebacker. He's probably one of the more underrated players in the game right now. And then Harrison Butker is probably one of the best kickers, if not the best kicker in football. But when you realistically look at them, and I was looking at their just rushing offense, total offense. I mean, everything middle of the pack. The only thing top 10 was rushing defense, which obviously is significant when you're playing the Saints, a team that wants to run the ball first. But so as much as we've said the Saints could be, maybe should be 4-0 or at least 3-1, I think it's very possible. The Chiefs could be and probably should be either 3-1 or 2-2 right now, despite their being 4-0. But like they say, you are what your record says you are. So what's the difference? We've already harped on this all week. What's the difference between the two organizations, the two squads, as they currently sit right here, right now? It dang sure ain't stats, like I just mentioned. It comes down to situational football. It comes down to execution, playing the game at its highest point when it matters the most. They make the plays in the biggest moments consistently, week in and week out, year in and year out. They're so freaking hard to beat because they excel at that, because they play better than they play all game in key moments, and that's enough in the NFL to overcome, because that's how this league is currently constructed. And when you do that over time, football is a funny game. You'd be surprised how much good luck, and how many breaks you get along the way. Isaiah Likely's toe on a millimeter out of bounds in week 1. The questionable 4th and 16 pass interference call against Cincinnati. Was that week 2 or was that week 3? Regardless, it happened. That's a big game, and that's the difference between winning and losing. Saints have struggled with this in that regard, especially the last 2 weeks. Better execution in situational football. They're 4-0, but hasn't been the case. Bottom line is simply this. Saints have some adversity. have a lot of adversity, and it's going to take a lot to overcome, especially when you're down to what they're down to on the offensive line. I mean, that was a big concern going into the season, especially being down to what you're down to on the offensive line. So there is no way I'm going to come on this broadcast, this podcast, this show, or any of our shows that we do leading up to the game and say, Saints are winning this game. I'm not doing it. But matchup-wise, for instance, I love the Saints secondary versus their receivers.
Yeah.
I like the Saints backers against their running backs. I think you've seen the theme here. I like the Saints defense against a lot of their offense, except for Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. But if by Tuesday morning the Saints are 3-2, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world to me because football-wise, matchup-wise, I think the Saints have a fair case against Kansas City on Monday night.
You know, NFL teams love the phrase next man up. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I'm really not, I'm concerned, obviously, but I don't think the sky is falling despite this incredibly long injury list we read off. The only guy I'm really concerned about is Taysom Hill.
That's the one.
Because you talk about next man up, there's no next man for Taysom Hill. There's no next man who can even come close to replicating all the things that he can do in this offense. You don't have a guy who can take a snap from the quarterback position, score a touchdown. Take a snap from the running back position, score a touchdown. Go out there, be your lead blocker. Go out there and catch a pass 25 yards down the field. So not having Taysom Hill in this game, I think the offense looks very different without him. I think you're handcuffed in a way because a lot of the things that Clint Kubiak may want to do with his shiny toy, he can't do because Taysom isn't there. But you look everywhere else, obviously the offensive line's banged up. Your quarterback's fine. You look at the running back position, Alvin Kamara, he's limited, but he was limited last week, and he went and got 26 touches against the Falcons. And you're getting Kendre Miller back, a guy you picked in the third round and had really high hopes for. So your running back position, it kind of got a bit of a jolt, a boost, if you will. Your receivers are healthy. Last week we were looking at the injury report, and Olave was on there. Cedric Wilson was on there. A.T. Perry, who was waived today, was on there. And so you've got Olave, Shaheed, Wilson, Tipton. They're all there. Dallin Holker, who had been on all season, who maybe could give this tight end room the jolt that it needs. Dallin Holker's okay for once this season. You look on the defensive side, your secondary's all right. You've got Marshawn Lattimore, Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, Tyrann Mathieu. Look at the linebackers. Willie Gay is hurt, but Willie Gay has been your third linebacker all year. Demario Davis, he's been practicing in a limited capacity.
Was he full today? He was
limited today.
Back to limited?
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, I think he's on his way back to the field, let's put it that way.
I'm especially from a guy who only missed one game due to injury. I expect him to play Monday night. He had an extra day to kind of heal and get ready. Alongside Pete Werner. Your defensive line, Brian Brzee limited, but Brian Brzee has been on and off the injury report at times this season, but he's played. So your defensive line's healthy. You got your two linebackers. You've got your entire secondary. You get your backup running back in Kendre Miller. Your wide receivers are healthy again. You're healthy in a lot of areas. The only area you're really lacking in is the offensive line. And in my opinion, the offensive line was injured against Atlanta, and they still came out and overperformed compared to what you would expect of an offensive line that was kind of patched together that week. So I think the Saints definitely have a chance to go in and give Kansas City a run for their money.
I agree. I also wonder, though, how often can you chance that with a fresh new look at patchwork offensive line? Like this week is another version of the patchwork offensive line. Lucas Patrick not being able to go, really, that's something. I mean, Lemieux is a guy who's battled injury his whole career. I mean, you just get one start, you're back injured again. My goodness. So now you're talking about that week 1 and week 2 lineup was one thing. Now you're on your fourth or fifth different offensive line combination. If you talk about just the way they had to kind of adjust and kind of reshape it, week 3, week 4, and now heading into week 5. So that's where I am concerned, because if that area is not at least average, Chris Jones can wreck the game like Jalen Carter did a couple weeks ago, like Jordan Davis did a couple of weeks ago. And if they can't run the ball, nothing else seems to matter with this offense. So they can run the ball. If they can't run the ball, the play action game, the whole crux of the offense kind of goes away if you take away the innate ability to run the football. But this Saints defense has been good. They just haven't been good in key moments. But for much of games, they've been. They've allowed 24 points in 2 weeks. 24 points in 2 weeks against the best quarterback in football, and he's the reason they're 4-0 right now. But when you handcuff a guy that much with the way they have, and let me read off their list, because they had Mike Dana limited, Clyde Edwards-Helaire limited, Kareem Hunt limited, McCole Hardman did not practice with a knee, Nick Bolton full participation, Derek Nottie full participation. But when you limit that much, there's only so many guys that you have to necessarily prep for on the edge, on the perimeter. So
it's important to mention with their report as well, they're injured too. Outside of the guys,
remember, they don't have
report,
Rasheed
Rice, Hollywood Brown, and Isaiah Pacheco. That's their starting running back.
They're not even on the list because they've been out.
Yeah, their starting running back and their top 2 receivers are also out. So just like the Saints are going in injured, KC's banged up too.
They're banged up on the outside, where the Saints are banged up on the inside. And we'll see. I mean, that could be the key matchup to the entire game. Who ultimately plays that better? And look, if Mahomes is going to be the guy that's kind of, sometimes this happens with a great player, is that you tend to take a few more chances because you don't quite have the level of quality you're used to on the outside. So sometimes a pass that you throw and the guy at the other end is a big-time playmaker. He ain't making that play, but now that 50-50 ball may go to the defender because of the player that's going out for that pass. And he's a guy that we know when it comes to Mahomes. When he breaks contain, that's when he's the best that ever played, because he takes off, they reset the play, they hit that second route. It's almost to the point now, the more I watch Mahomes, when he breaks containment, I almost want him to run, because, yes, he will probably gain good yardage running, but when he breaks contain and he throws that 60-yard bomb sideways across the field, that's where he really hurts you. Yep. So I don't know how they're going to coach that, and you never really know, because you got to be in the moment when the instincts come. But I do think, all things being considered, this is not the worst matchup in the world for the Saints.
I agree. And like you said, it's all about, Dennis Allen always talks about finishing at the quarterback. That's one of his favorite phrases when he's talking about his defensive line. And that's what it's going to come down to, containing Mahomes. And when you get to him, it can't be, you grabbed his jersey and he got out of there. You got to get him down. Because one thing that Travis Kelce is elite at, better than anybody who plays today, and one of the greatest at, especially with Mahomes, is finding the holes in zone coverage. He's very cognizant of, my quarterback's in trouble, this is my route, but I know if I go right there, that's a hole in the zone, and my quarterback will see me. And that's all of a sudden, that's a 40-yard gain. So that's going to come down to, like I said, Dennis Allen always preaches on finishing at the quarterback. This is the biggest week for that. And it's worth mentioning, they struggled with the tight end week 3 against Philadelphia. Dallas Goedert went for about 170 on them. But they completely shut out Kyle Pitts. The same Kyle Pitts who had a pretty good game yesterday in Tampa when Atlanta went crazy against Tampa.
Wow. 509 yards for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, so they shut out that Kyle Pitts just on Sunday. So you would like to think that Travis Kelce, who had really been struggling, you got me. Who had really been struggling all season. Hopefully that doesn't happen for the Saints, but had really been struggling all season. Travis Kelce kind of have a bounce back game last week against the Chargers. Hopefully they can kind of keep him contained.
Yeah, and I think, but if he's the only one you're really, really worried about, I think you can live with a couple things with him here and there. Because as the game plays itself out, you would get enough stops. Because, I mean, even if he does wreck the game, or even if he does go off, you can still find enough stops in other areas. But you got to make the stops at the key moments, which is really what it's all about, because they always make the plays in the key moments, and you can't make the stops in the key moments. I wanted to go somewhere else. What was I going to say? Saints-wise, though, the Taysom Hill factor is concerning because of how much Clint Kubiak uses him and how effective he was last week. But I'm really curious about, though, there is one guy on the Saints roster right now.
Okay.
Was there a couple? But one in a prominent position right now that knows all about Arrowhead and has played a lot in Arrowhead. He hasn't had a lot of success in Arrowhead, but he's played there a lot. That being Derek Carr. He has won once in Arrowhead, 2020. I'm kind of thinking I need a little bit of a Derek Carr game. I need a little bit of a Derek Carr hey man, this used to be your world. This used to be this is one of your biggest rivals when you were a Raider. Like, get in there, lead this team. Take no prisoners, whatever the case may be. No, we got this. We don't care if you're the Super Bowl champs. We're here to win. Get in and get out, because I think they'll do a lot for the team's psyche right now. Losing 2 in a row is tough, but if you got to 3-2, and the third win was against the Chiefs, where everybody, you, me, everybody in that sports office back there, everybody watching right now, when they saw that schedule, all right, do I win here, loss here, win here? When they got to week 5, Monday night against Arrowhead, everybody 100% predicted the Chiefs win. So if you were able to get that could do a lot for the psyche. And if you were to lose, I don't think it's going to suck because you lose 3 in a row. It wouldn't kill you as much as you would think because it's an out-of-conference game, but it would still pin you back in the NFC South. And obviously, you have Tampa next week. But there's also this. You have Monday Night Football against Arizona, Kansas City. Then you come back for a Sunday against Tampa Bay. Then a Thursday against Denver. That's 3 games in like 10 days? That's back-to-back short weeks. So there's a challenge ahead with the schedule as well. So a lot is riding on this game, and I know they do understand the urgency of the moment. I just hope they have enough to push through.
Yep, and you mentioned Derek Carr is the guy you need to see. The guy who I need to see be an X factor in this game is the guy we mentioned earlier when we were talking about the injuries. It's a guy who's actually back on the practice field, and that's running back Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller is a guy who Dennis Allen even has said it's hard to evaluate him because he's never practicing. He got hurt on, the first rep of training camp?
He didn't get to a rep.
Yeah, he didn't even get to a rep.
It was all warm-ups.
Yeah, so he in warm-ups, so you didn't see Kendre Miller in training camp. And Kendre Miller's a guy we were talking about, like, hey, if the contract thing doesn't work with Alvin Kamara, how much faith do you have in Kendre? Kendre Miller hasn't given the Saints a lot of reasons to have faith in him so far because he hasn't been on the field enough to show it. He's back. Jamal Williams really hasn't been very productive in the last few weeks. Alvin Kamara is getting way too many touches, 97 to be precise, through 4 weeks.
55 over 2 games.
Yep, 20 in week 1 against Carolina, 22 in week 2. He had 29 in week 3 and 26 last week for a running back that's about to turn 30 years old. Alvin Kamara, by the way, with banged up ribs and a hip. You cannot continue to push 30 touches for Alvin Kamara every game. He will not last through the 18 weeks of the NFL regular season. That's where the sophomore, but the guy you drafted in the 3rd round last year comes in, who's fresh off the injury report, a full participant at practice, who has shown in short spurts he can be explosive. You saw him against Chicago last year, against New England last year, against Atlanta last year when he rushed for 73 and a touchdown. Kendre Miller, when he's gotten on the field, has shown you flashes. He just hasn't been on the field enough. So if there's anybody who needs to come in this game and make a statement and say, hey, I'm here, it's Kendre Miller.
Well, we had a podcast on Wednesday where I pleaded the case to go pursue Davante Adams because this offense is in such desperate need for a playmaker. Well, a playmaker last time I checked, you can still find a playmaker at the running back position. It doesn't just have to be a wide receiver. It could be a running back. It could be a tight end. It could be a wide receiver. If Kendre Miller is healthy, can he emerge as a playmaker? I can promise you they want him so bad to work out. They want it so bad to work out for him where he is a bona fide. They want him to be the second back.
Yeah.
They want him to be.
Maybe even the heir apparent.
Everybody sees Jamal Williams right now. Okay, Jamal Williams is fine for a straight run for 5 or 6 yards if it's blocked up correctly. But come on, we all know Jamal. If it's not a short yard situation, it's not going to happen. And even in Alvin's case, he's had a fantastic season, and he gashed some gashing runs. But I don't know how many he's got over 20 yet. I mean, he's still capable of big play, but there is room for someone to take a handoff that they can trust and just kind of break one for 60. Can Kendre Miller be that guy? I don't know. We haven't seen enough of him because he hasn't been healthy. So that's something they really desperately want. And then when you look at the current situation on their roster, he's the only option that could qualify for that. That little bit of unknown, that little bit of quote-unquote potential, he's the only one that could potentially qualify for that. We don't know if he can get there because who knows with him, he could injure himself again.
Right.
But I do think that's the little glimmer of optimism that they have with him, and it's probably why they haven't already moved on from him. Now, look, we should also mention, as we wind things down here, we should also mention the Saints made some moves today. I mentioned Connor McGovern. They brought him up. They had to waive a player because, again, they signed him to the active.
Right.
So they waived A.T. Perry. I know a lot of people reacted very strongly to the A.T. Perry waiving. I know a lot of people kind of jumped to the, is this for Devontae Adams? And I would love for that to be the case, but it's not the case. It was for the Connor McGovern thing, and I talked to a couple of people. There's a strong chance A.T. Perry, if he clears waivers, will be back on the could be back on the Saints practice squad. This is surely a numbers thing because we read off all the fourth center in 3 weeks. I read off all the names, so that's potentially why they had to just find a spot. A.T. Perry's been inactive the last couple of weeks, and they haven't used a whole lot of 3 wide receiver sets anyway. So if it ended up being a fairly easy move. Now, it doesn't mean they're happy with A.T. Perry. It doesn't mean they're satisfied with A.T. Perry. He's been inactive. They had high hopes for him, but right now, I don't think it's a total, let's push this guy to the side. But I do think, because when you waive a player, there's always the risk someone else could pick him up, and that could potentially happen for A.T. Perry. But I also think there's a chance he could return on the Saints practice squad, and maybe that's the path for him because right now it hasn't worked. And look, he had a slow training camp as well. He hadn't quite connected with the Kubiak system. Yeah,
and he's another guy. You talk about it being hard to kind of get a read on certain guys because they're not on the field. And we talked about A.T. Perry earlier. We said there was an opportunity for him.
Absolutely.
You knew Olave was going to be the starter. You knew Shaheed was going to be the starter. But for a while, that wide receiver 3 spot was up for grabs.
Yeah.
And it was Mason Tipton, who didn't play in the preseason, who grabbed it instead of A.T. Perry. So,
yeah, and we still need to see that third receiver emerge. Or 3 receivers, however you label 1, 2, and 3. 3 receivers to emerge just to give you a little more versatility and flexibility on this offense. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys for watching. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.